This is a little series I want to do where I evaluate an older video from as recent as 5 months before the current time the video is posted up to as early as the beginning of YouTube. So for the first episode of this series, I'm going to look at a video from September of 2016, so although a little more than a year ago, still pretty recent in memory. The video was a response video to a collab that The Amazing Atheist did called Questions White Men Have for SJWs, which was uploaded around 2 or 3 months earlier. The video in question is called Reasonable Questions for Anti-SJWs, very heavy emphasis for quotes on the reasonable part. The video is made by Kristi Winters, who is a feminist YouTuber who makes an interesting amount of videos about Sargon of Akkad and Bering. She collaborates with people such as Tim Blake, Michael Rowlands, and the cuck lord himself, Steve Shives. Now, the order I choose for this video is not the video's original order. I'm gonna pick an order for each of the individuals and answer each of their question one by one.
Rather than telling people you disagree with to drink bleach, wouldn't it be more productive for you to have an actual conversation about the issues you feel matter? Or is it just easier to do the bleach thing?
Did you think Fantano was being serious when he said that in TJ's video? Are you having a Spino moment?
Why don't you seem as concerned with actual feminist theory in academia as you are with wrecking people for views?
Well, feminist theory in academia leads to feminist SJW types thinking the way they do. Some of the people you're referring to have actually looked into it.
Do you really think you can spend your entire life in a perpetual state of emotional immaturity? Do you actually imagine that you will be able to perpetuate your adolescence for your entire Wait, didn't somebody else ask this one? Wait, I gotta... Ah, fuck.
You just do it too.
How do you define right-wing? Anti-SJWs often have an aversion to being labeled as right-wing, yet they regularly defend the right and bash the left. Therefore, why is being labeled right-wing a bad thing to you? And if it's because right-wing is used as a pejorative, can you not see how labeling people as SJWs or regressives is also pejorative?
To put a full context here, some antis don't view it as a pejorative because they actually are what you would consider to be right-wing. Some people take aversion to it because they just aren't as left as what you would consider to be a social justice warrior. For instance, describe Naked Ape as right-winged. You are correct. Describe Mr. Rebzion as right-winged. Not really.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists? Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you, even if you don't agree much?
You don't have to answer for them if you don't want to. You're not the same person as those other feminists, even though I'm pretty sure I've seen you claim that you don't identify as a feminist, but you identify as a progressive. The problem is, I've seen people on your end do the same thing for antis. So, would you say that's fair?
Isn't it offensive to men to assume that a man could only ever want equality for women, and therefore be comfortable with feminism as a whole in order to get laid, and that reduces us to beasts? If that was the case, wouldn't I attempt to get laid from my views instead of not ever trying that?
I find this question to be funny on the basis that this video was uploaded not long after Richard Carrier from Atheism Plus was outed as a sexual harasser. And between the uploads of these two videos, it appeared that Joss Whedon used feminism to help him get laid in Hollywood. So not all of them, but it seems like a lot of them do.
Why is it that this feminist represents all feminists, but this men's rights activist doesn't represent all men's rights activists?
Whoa, wait, sexism all of a sudden? Ladies and men are different? So we're supposed to punch men and not hit ladies and open doors for men, but not ladies? Fuck you, get out of my face, you tiny piece of shit.
And to this day, we still haven't found any evidence that that guy actually was a men's rights activist.
Why do you find it so hard to believe that feminists are being harassed online?
Why do you find it so hard to believe that men get harassed online?
Why are you so obsessed with Anita Sarkeesian?
Why are you so obsessed with Carl Benjamin?
I am deeply concerned with male addiction rates, suicide rates, and abuse rates, because I have worked with these issues in the quote-unquote real world. Would you be willing as anti-feminists to put aside your differences with feminists for the greater good of addressing these issues, especially as the kind of solutions needed are not necessarily gendered? And if so, I would actually like you to let me know, because I'm not fucking around or presenting any gotchas here. I actually really think that we could get something done if we work together. So, yeah.
Well, that's very notable of you. I think the issue you might not see is that in the past and today, many feminists have attacked or mocked people for wanting to help men out. I'm not saying you were involved in this, I have no reason to believe you were. But when you see stories like the story of Earl Silverman, it's hard for some people to believe that feminists actually care.
One of the major arguments that I see in many of your videos is that it is possible to separate criticism of the religion of Islam from the actual Muslim people. And yet, this line seems to be crossed very often. I see things like raghead or camel fucker or other things like that in your comment sections. I see people taking very serious shots at Muslims in videos and hangouts, and they don't get called out. At least not that I can see. So my question is this: why should a person of conscience who is concerned about the Muslim people and their community not being harmed or mistreated, why should they believe that you're actually only attempting to look at the ideas and talk about the ideas if you ignore bigotry that's occurring right in front of you? And in that light, would you be willing to break bread and salt with moderate Muslim people on your videos, have hangouts, invite them to your channels, just in order to build some bridges there and to learn more about what they think and how they feel and what their experience has been, so that information and knowledge can be furthered?
It's funny you say that about moderate Muslims, which an actual moderate Muslim, Majid Nawaz, is constantly accused of being an Islamophobe by progressives in the media. One problem is that moderate Muslims that the mainstream media like to push still have pretty extremist views, they're just more moderate in how they explain them. You see this a lot with people who work for AJ+. Also, the slurs you mentioned are really more towards people of Middle Eastern descent in general, and not just Muslims.
You often say that you are for equality of opportunity, but if people of color, for instance, have to overcome barriers whites do not, such as discrimination and unequal treatment, as are well documented in various studies, then how can the current situation be thought of as equal opportunity in any real way? And why do you consider it racist to discuss these issues?
The problem with this question is equality of opportunity doesn't mean you're going to get treated equally in the workplace. It means you're getting equal opportunity to get hired into the job. That's what equality of opportunity is.
What is it with you people and skulls? Seriously? What is it with you people and skulls? For the last time, what is it with you people and committing actual literal felonies? Like, you might want to work on that? I mean, I thought the Ralph retort was so rational when he was fantasizing about beating up women with dyed hair, but then he assaulted a police officer, and finally I was convinced.
First of all, what is it with you people in skulls? Also, I'm not very sad about Ralph going to prison. He doesn't seem to be there yet. At least at the time this video is recording. This is hilarious coming from someone who shares the same ideology as Sarah Nyberg and Hannibal the Victor. This video was also uploaded around the same time that Devin Faraci was outed as a sexual harasser, and even though it was him who was being accused, he still listened and believed. Like a fucking idiot. Funny enough, months between your video and my response to this video, a friend of yours, Russian Deadpool, who runs the Skeptic Feminist channel, ended up murdering his girlfriend. Were you angry about him? Did you ostracize him for that? No, instead you got mad because some of your political opponents made fun of him for the first half hour of a 2-hour stream.
If SJWs are bad,
Because they spend too much time whining and don't talk about real problems, then why aren't you talking about those problems instead of just whining about the other people over and over and over for literally years? I mean, in the scale of priorities, that's like even lower, right? You know, you've got the real problems, you've got the things that feminists worry about, and then you've got you going, oh, how dare they? Just, how dare they have different priorities from me? Why can't they do what I do? Whine about whining forever for a living. That's healthy.
So censorship isn't a real problem, because I'm pretty sure it is. Also, Sargon, Crouten T, Wizard of Cause, the Sandra guy, and a slew of others have actually talked about what's going on in the world. In fact, after this video, they found more importance in talking about stuff that's going on in the world. Nice straw man, though, by the way.
Why is trying and failing to debunk a study into sexual assault the #1 priority for a rational thinker now? Does it maybe say something about your priorities? Nah, it's fine, it's the feminazis, we have to stop them. They're taking away our video game.
Trying and succeeding is what I think you mean. The U.S. Department of Justice back in 2013 proved that that study was inaccurate. Also, it's good to debunk it because if people believe it, that's what we call fear-mongering. Also, I'm not playing your stupid fucking joke.
Why is a literal teenager's different definition of racism from you so horrifying that you all have to go, No! No, we have to stop him! We've got to debunk him now! Ah!
Retarded, crazy, lame, and stupid.
You claim to be proponents of rational, logical, evidence-based argumentation. That's great. That's entirely laudable. But when I look at your online activity, when I look at, I don't know, for example, your Twitter feed, that's often not what I see. How do you reconcile this claim to be evidence-based and rational and logical against stuff like, oh, I was just trolling you, oh, I was just shitposting, or TLDR?
Yeah, you're really gonna get intellectual discussion with this. People still waiting for those 280 characters featured, Jack. Also, social media is not a place to go to be intellectual to begin with. Plus, just because people are intellectual doesn't mean they have to be in intellectual mode all the time.
What is the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of dislikes, the number of retweets, the number of subscribers, any of those numbers, any of those metrics, what have they got to do with the argument? Deepak Chopra, for example, a man who trots out an endless stream of pseudoscientific quantum woo bollocks, has nearly 3 million followers. So what? Those people follow him because he tells them what they want to hear. Why even mention the number of followers you have? What difference does it make?
Let me guess, you're referring to Thunderfoot when you say this. And I agree with you, it was really egotistical of him to always use that against his opponents. And I agree that it's stupid to do that in general, but sometimes there's a reason why a lot of people seem to agree on something being an answer for an issue.
Do you understand the key importance of reproducibility and repeatability in scientific research? That simply going to Google Scholar, doing a 30-second search for keywords and pulling out the first paper you find that backs up your stance is not a particularly credible way to do research. That you have to have a much broader overview to read the material, to follow the citations through, to look at the broad brush approach to a particular problem. You do realise that you're as much of a social justice warrior as those you critique. It's just that you espouse a different form of social justice, a rather less considerate, rather less forgiving, rather less kind form of social justice.
Do you have any evidence for that first claim? Because I'm not aware of anyone who does that. Also, really? You think your side that's filled with doxers, people who send hate mobs against people over something as petty as wearing a t-shirt, making a joke about dongles, deciding to not see a movie, or try to get people fired for just simple criticism of the movement, is the more kind one? You're fucking delusional.
As a supporter, as a proponent of freedom of speech, why do you want to quash academic freedom? If you're not familiar with the concept of academic freedom, it's worth, in the UK at least, looking up the 1988 Education Reform Act and seeing what that says about the rights of academics to put across unpopular opinions.
The guy who supports an ideology that wishes to silence and censor opinions that they don't like because he cares about free speech all of a sudden. The academics do have rights, but the students should have rights to challenge the academics. I would hope you agree with that. Since I am aware you left social media a couple months after this video was uploaded, how do you feel that your friends were for weeks trying to get Sargon kicked out of MythCon, or how they feel about their friendship with ContraPoints, who is pro-deplatforming?
Able to understand the irony of responding to the perceived political correctness of the left with exasperated reactionary hypersensitivity of your own?
I don't deny this is probably true for some of the antis, but After your guys' reaction to the election on Twitter, I don't think you're in the place to judge. Also, this tweet by you totally isn't reactionary or exasperated at all now, is it?
Do you deny that systemic racism against black people is like a thing in general? If so, what? Okay, just step up, just cover your ears for a second and let the smart people talk. If not, why is it so much more important to you to demonize groups like Black Lives Matter than to actually use your platforms to discuss actual solutions to issues surrounding race and racism?
You know, when you're very dismissive that way, it makes people not want to answer the question. And systematic racism hasn't stopped you from getting a YouTube channel. Also, Black Lives Matter is demonized because they are racist against white people. They want to bring back segregation in the form of blacks-only safe spaces. They advocate for killing cops, and they block off roads when they protest. And they've rioted on more than one occasion. Really good anti-racist movement you have there.
Do you understand basic English syntax? Like, you know, if I say this cat is pretty, I don't mean that all other cats aren't pretty. Like, do you really not get why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter is not only racially insensitive, but just patently ridiculous?
So you're saying it's ridiculous to say all lives equally matter, and you call us racist. Also, your cat is pretty does not have the same connotation.
Are you willing to publicly acknowledge and admonish the massive amount of hatred, bullying, harassment, and intimidation that a lot of your fans infringe upon people? And I don't mean these tiny disclaimers that you put under the description fold or flash for 2 seconds at the beginning of the video that you know nobody reads. I mean a public and ongoing anti-bullying stance. Or do you kind of like watching your fans go around harassing people and calling them slurs and telling them to kill themselves? You kind of like it, don't you? I mean, if that's your thing, I guess that's just what you're into. Just makes you a dick.
Funny enough, after this video was uploaded, like months after it was uploaded, was VidCon. And at VidCon, the big evil Sargon of Akkad went to Lacey Green and apologized for any wrongdoings his fans did to her. When are you dipshits going to admonish people like Randy Lee Harper or Leigh Alexander or Margaret Plus for their god-awful fucking behavior?
Are you aware that the ridiculous buzzwords you helped to popularize, like SJW and cuck and regressive, have all lost whatever meaning they once had, and only serve now as catch-all insults and pejoratives to derail any meaningful conversation?
They were meant to be those things to begin with, but I see what you did there, saying that we do that with those words, like we say you do with racist, sexist, and misogynist, even though you guys do that.
You do understand that reading the title of a book or an article or watching the first 15 seconds of a video is not going to give you a deep, nuanced understanding of what that book or article or video is about, right? That being said, how can you expect to understand or critique feminist sources if you don't even attempt to understand what they're trying to say?
That's funny because Sargon reported on a story in which Pohl had found the identity of an Antifa member who just smacked a dude in the head with the bike lock. But rather than listening to the facts being presented to you, you decided maybe to stop watching it so you could call Sargon a doxer, even though he didn't dox anybody.
So Pohl was right.
Why is it that you go on and fucking on about safe spaces and trigger warnings and delicate little flowers, but continue to hide behind your cartoon avatars and your childish pseudonyms, and whenever anyone calls you out on your sexist, racist, homophobic, bigoted rhetoric, you become the argument of your own scorn and are hashtag triggered, as they say?
Since you basically asked 2 questions and acted like it was one, for the second question, aren't you basically engaging in what you were criticizing about people using cuck and regressive? Also, I think the reason people use anonymity is because, I don't know, is it based on the fact that you guys really like to dox people and get them fired from their jobs?
What is third wave feminism? Because I've often heard you folks insist that you have no objection to feminism in general. It's specifically third wave feminism that you have a quarrel with. So what is third wave feminism specifically? And what specifically about third wave feminism do you have such a problem with?
You. People like you, Steve. When you engage in cult-like behavior which hasn't changed since this video came out, you cause people to hate you. You poison the well by falsely accusing your ideological opponents of being racist, sexist, or having some other forms of bigotry while being those things yourself, and constantly advocate for them to be censored and deplatformed. And you're not the only one. This is a common behavior in your movement. Some people in your movement have done worse things than you, such as sending internet hate mobs towards people engaged in doxing people. The only actual definition of third-wave feminism is that it's just modern feminism.
Since so many of you profess to be admirers of second-wave feminism as opposed to third-wave feminism, I thought it would be interesting to ask which second-wave feminists in particular do you appreciate? Which books written by second-wave feminists have you read and found interesting? Which second-wave feminist activists have you specifically admired as you formed the opinion that you like second-wave feminism but you have no use for third-wave feminism? I'm just curious.
Let's be honest, Steve, you're taking the views of people who just became anti-SJWs and acting like they all think like this, aren't you? Outside of Camille Lepaglia, Christina Hoff Summers, and Ayan Hirsi Ali, which second-wave feminists do they actually respect? Trust me, Steve, they dislike Gloria Steinem and Julie Bindel as much as they dislike the third-wavers.
Wherever did you get the idea that racism was a self-applied identity? And if the only true racists are the racists who self-identify as racists, how can we ever expect to make any social progress to reduce racism? Or did I just answer my own question?
Okay, you got it, Steve. Not all people who are racist admit to being racist. A good example of that would be the case of Steve Shives.
In videos and in the comment sections, anti-feminists often take up the most extreme, or the weakest feminist position they can find, or they just straight up misrepresent what the feminist position is. Instead, why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument you can find and really challenge yourself?
Well, Kristi, in your recent crusade against Sargon going to mythicist Milwaukee, you have misrepresented his views and the meanings of certain memes in an article you wrote on Acadian Times as if that's a reputable blog. And as it's been said before, I can't remember which of the responses to this video at the time said it, but if it's a strong argument, then why argue against it?
Discussed or done a video about black on black crime. When are you going to do a video about white on white crime and what we as white people can do to solve the problems in our community?
Well, Kristi, I see you've certainly taken part in solving problems in the white community when you shared that alt-right video about the skeptic community being part of the Jewish conspiracy. But seriously, Kristi, blacks make up less of the population than whites. That's why it's a bigger issue.
If you say you're an egalitarian, will you call out the man-hating slurs that you see coming from people within your community? People who use terms like cuck, beta male, faggot, or mangina? All of these things basically distill men down into thinking that the most important thing about them is to be having sex with a woman. That's rather offensive. So what are you doing to stop this kind of behavior in your community?
Nothing. I'm not their fucking mom. People are responsible for their own actions, unless they actually incite it. Also, man-hating slurs? Beta male is used for a specifically weak man. Cuck and mangina are usually used for male feminists. And faggot is a slur against gay people, though it's basically a petty insult at this point. But Kristi, what are you going to do about people who claim to be feminists, claim to be for women's independence, yet have tantrums over a single woman saying a phrase, "I'm not a feminist"?
If you identify as an egalitarian, then I'm interested in your take on the usefulness of the concept of the original position as laid out by John Rawls in his theory of justice.
Ah, the great egalitarian work your friends do, such as mock people for wanting to save a girl's life from Saudi Arabia or whatever hellhole she lived in. One thing never changes about the SJWs. They are all projecting morons who have no self-awareness. If you have any older videos you would like to see me take down, send me a link on Twitter. My DMs should be open, but I will be finding some I want to do myself. In the meantime, take care.